Get started here.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. It's a nice time for us to be able to think about warmer days and gardens and what we do with all of the produce that we have from that. My name is Melinda Hill. I am with the Wayne County Extension Office as their Family and Consumer Science Educator, and also serve as an area leader in the northeast part of Ohio. So food preservation has been one of those passions that I've had through the years. I really grew up doing food preservation with my grandmothers and my mother, and so it's also one of those family traditions that I really enjoy sharing. So my apologies, I ended up in the poultry breakout this morning. So yes, so I assume we're ready to get rolling.
I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint and get it ready to go here. There we go.
Thank you,
Karen. So officially, we are doing food preservation, what makes sense. So this is going to be a really, really shortened version of some high points of food preservation today.
Absolutely, and to kind of walk through the process of helping us think through one of the goals that we like to share is, why are we doing this? And as I mentioned, it's been part of a family tradition for myself. But what we do have to acknowledge is that things have really changed. You know, food preservation has been around since the 1400s, so it's nothing that's new, but the process, the timing, the science, the protocol for making sure that we have safe food for our family has definitely changed. Whether we're talking about pickling or jams and jellies or some of our low acid foods, our vegetables, our meats, all of that has been tested, and we need to make sure that we're using the most current recommendations. And Kate will cover that a little bit later in our presentation. So as we go forth, one of the things that Jared did with you, I think right before we left, was to do one of the polls. And on there, it had several choices. So unfortunately, I don't think we can pull the poll up, but my recollection is that the majority were doing this because, as we all know, when the gardens are in production, I've got a lot more than what I can eat or even share with my neighbors all at once. So I want to save that food and be able to access it during the fall, winter, and early spring when I don't have those foods that are quick and available. So that time of plenty to time of need, got it. The second one that we hear quite often when we're teaching classes is that I know what's in that food. Whether I choose to add a little salt as a flavor enhancer, it is not used for a preservative, but I know the quality of food that's in that jar, and I know if there's anything else that I've had to add to it. There is a certain amount of personal satisfaction when you stand back at the end of the day and I've done 1, 2, or 3 canner loads of food, and I can listen to the pop, the jars. I know that my food is safe and shelf stable, that I have to be able to access it throughout the off seasons. Whether I'm canning, whether I'm freezing, whether I'm drying, there's just a sense that I can take this food, I can enjoy it then for some of our family favorites. The distribution piece may not be one that we think about, but I think what we were intending for this is, where does it really come from? Is it something that's grown at a farm market, a farmer's market? Is it local? Is it someplace within the state? Has it come from out of state or even across the nation or out of the country? So that distribution timeline plays a role with the quality, the varieties that can ship or can travel the best. And sometimes when I understand that what I really like is best in a smaller location, that becomes a concern, that becomes something that I really want to pay attention to. And then, of course, the convenience. Kate and I have often talked about, canning meat is the ultimate fast food meal because it's something that I can open the jar, I can add a few ingredients, bring it to a boil, and have a meal on the table very quickly. So all of those are factors that we want to consider as we begin to think about either planting our own garden or the amount of foods that we want to be looking for in our community to be able to preserve. But along with this, not just the personal satisfaction and the points that we've made here, but we really need to think about the cost and the investment that's involved. So Kate, would you like to talk with us about that, please?
Okay, I have to unmute my phone first. And so I do want to move into the cost, but just to recap, the poll came out that the answers were 64% of people said they preserve to save foods from time of plenty to a time of need. 45% said they want to know what's in their food. 55% said they wanted the personal satisfaction. Nobody answered distribution because I think some people think about distribution as sharing what they preserve with others in their family, their community, they're giving it to their friends. And 27% said convenience. I also think that now, given the situation in today's world, more people are looking at preserving food because of the shortages that we're seeing on our shelves right now. And I think that is where a lot of people are thinking about preserving food from planting their gardens now and to preserve food into this coming summer. And so that's getting really interesting as we're looking into the next season. So why we preserve food has its own reasons, but then we think about the actual cost of preserving food. The bottom line is that most of the time you are not, absolutely not saving money doing this. But as I said, the current world situation might make you think about, say, preserving food on your own so that you actually do have food on hand in case of situations of bare shelves in the stores, which is what we run into recently a lot. But we do want to consider all of these costs. Melinda already mentioned about where does that food come from? Are you growing it in your garden? Are you putting significant dollars into your garden, into seeds or garden equipment or garden chemicals if you're using chemicals? Is that an initial investment, or do you already have those things? The same thing goes with the equipment that you have to use to do some of this preservation. Are you buying a canner or a freezer? The same with the small equipment, whether that is canning jars or freezer containers. Some of those things we inherit from family or friends. Sometimes you can find really nice canners at the thrift stores or at a flea market that may only need 1 or 2 parts replaced or updated for a lovely little price. However, to make that initial investment can be very significant. So we need to think about those things. Also thinking about the energy cost. If you are going to be preserving by canning a lot of food in 1 year, the cost of your gas or electricity is significant to do all of that canning. If you happen to have a gas well on your property that doesn't cost you any money to run, then that's great. If you don't, you will have a lot of energy costs. The cost of running a freezer for the whole year. So maybe it doesn't cost you a lot to freeze the food, to blanch it, initially, but then you have to think about the cost of running your freezer throughout the year. And then there's the thought of our time. Your time is not free. The time that you put into preserving your food takes away time from doing something else. And so we have to think about that. Melinda talked about the fact that canned meat is the ultimate convenience food. But that is because you put in the time on the front end of doing all of that work. It takes 90 minutes to process some of these products. It takes 75 minutes to process a batch of meat. So that's just in the canner time. That is not the prep and the bringing it to the pressure and then the cooling time. It can take upwards of 3 hours to do an entire process of a single batch of meat. So when we're thinking about the time we put into it to actually make the product in the front end, to have the convenience on the back end, that can be significant time. And then thinking about storage. So, you know, we need to think about how much space in our homes we are taking up with a freezer or with shelving to hold all of our canned goods. Because in some homes, storage space is at a premium. And all of these things are trade-offs. And so it is a matter of just thinking it through, not saying one decision is better than another, but every decision has its own choices. So for every person, just make that decision on your own. So the next part of this is, as you're thinking about growing your own food, if you are thinking that, that does have its own benefits.
It really does. And I think Kate and I have, hopefully we're giving you the pros and the cons, and we're sparring some thoughts, because actually this is a picture of the garden that my parents have had for years. As I said, it's a family tradition. So it's just one of those things that is activity. You know, my parents are older, but it definitely gets them out and really lets them enjoy digging in the dirt, that mental stress relief. While they may not have that, that's one of the things that I really look forward to, is going out and, you know, whether I can use the hoe or I get down on my knees and be able to do some of the weeding, whichever the case may be. It is a way of mental health for me. But what I think we same flavor. How many times do we try a recipe or we taste something as simple as a tomato and say, this just doesn't taste like I remember? Well, there's a lot of varieties out there. And so if we can identify the ones that we really like, then that's a way and an opportunity for us to be able to grow our own. Something that if we've got a family, if we've got children, what we might consider is the garden is the ultimate classroom. Whether we're talking about reading a seed package and planting the seeds and how far apart, when we talk about planning it so that the harvest doesn't come at the moment that we want to take a family vacation or that other events are happening. So we can plan around that as well. And so using that science and math activities can be very helpful as far as an educational opportunity. The last thing I'll just mention here is, in addition to increasing our property values and feelings of reward, ask yourself, what do you already know about gardening and what do you need to learn? So those are things that I might want to consider about how large I make my garden. Is this just a hobby? Is it actually planting food for my family for the winter? My encouragement would be start small so that you're not looking at it as a burden, but as an activity that you can be successful with. So Kate, share with us some of the canning points that we need to talk about.
Okay, so some of the major things to remember as we kind of get to the last few minutes of our time here. bottom line of things to remember with canning. If you have a dial gauge pressure canner, so that is a pressure canner with a gauge with numbers on it, those have to be tested for accuracy, which means calibrated every year, because they're going to get bumped and knocked around. They can get out of whack. Your OSU Extension office can test those for accuracy. So once our offices reopen, we will be more than happy to test those for you. So I will tell you just to watch your media, watch your county office Facebook pages for notices of when we will start doing canner testing again for dates and locations. All low acid foods, that means things like vegetables, meat, poultry, seafood, they must be pressure canned. They're only recommended for canning in a pressure canner, and that is because the bacterium Clostridium botulinum is destroyed in low acid foods when they are processed with the right time and pressure in a pressure canner. If you process these in a boiling water bath canner, there is a very high risk of botulism poisoning, and that is something that nobody wants to put their family or their community at risk for. The last bullet there is about tomatoes. Over the years, we've had a gazillion varieties of tomatoes on the market, and while a lot of tomatoes have a fair bit of acid to them, there are some out there that are just right under that limit of where we consider a high acid food. And so because we can't say if this tomato or that tomato is going to have enough acid, we add additional acid, which is in the form of citric acid or tomato juice, to all tomato products that are going to be processed as whole, halved, crushed, or juiced tomatoes. And so when you get tomato canning recipes that are for those products, you are going to add citric acid or lemon juice to all of those. Additionally, we don't can our own canning recipes. We don't make up canning recipes. We don't find them on the internet that just say, hey, this sounds like fun. We follow tested, research-based canning recipes from reputable sources. So these are two of our absolute best resources: the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and the website is there, nchsp.uga.edu, and the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. Now you can actually access and download the complete USDA guide on the National Center's website. If you go to the link that says publications on the left-hand side, you can download the entire book right there. Those research-based recipes are completely tested in a lab. They find out what the pH level is, how long it takes to get to the right temperature in the middle. And then for OSU, we have our own fact sheet source called Ohio Line that has all of these fact sheets on it, and the website is down there at the bottom. And again, tons of resources from the basics, like canning basics, basics of canning fruit, freezing basics, to okay.
Looks like everybody else is too.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks to all our speakers and participants for hanging in there with us as we worked through all of this. And thank you. Sorry.